and I'm co-host, so I can be the back and support when people ask questions. And Nina will, as usual, offer mandala on behalf of everybody. And yeah, and most of us have done prostrations if that's our practice.
That's right. So just for this mandala that Nina is going to offer, you just visualize all the marvelous things of the world that make people happy. You pile them up, and then you imagine offering to the Buddha as a request for the teachings, and as if the Buddha were here. Well, if we understand what Buddha means, the Buddha mind, the Dharmakaya is here. So we offer the mandala requesting the teachings. It's really auspicious meaning. Okay.
Hello, Venerable Robina.
Hello, happy to see you.
And I hope, thank you, very happy to see you too. And I hope everybody who is comfortable, please join me in. So it's not just me offering, but we all offer, and also visualize all the other living beings offering beautiful mandala with us.
And there's a nice extra touch that I often say. The Lamas don't say it, but I remember Lama Zopa telling us one time in Tantra, when you make offerings, from the point of view of Tantra, when you make offerings, one of the key things is the very meaning of the word to offer, which is chur in Tibetan, puja in Sanskrit. The very essence of the meaning is when you make the offering, you imagine the recipient, in this case, the guru, the Buddha, experiencing the joy of receiving it. That's particularly from tantric point of view. Well, we're not necessarily talking tantra here, but it's for me something very marvelous to think about. So even as we say idam guru ratnam, we imagine the Buddha totally delighted, receiving our offering, accepting our offering. It's great meaning. It's great meaning. Okay.
So let's start. Saji pöki jukshin metog tramri rablinji nidegen padi sangye jingdu mikte ulwa idroku namdak jingla chupashok. Perfect, pure, holy gurus from the billowing clouds of wisdom and compassion in the sky of the Dharmakaya, please let fall a rain of profound and extensive Dharma upon the receptacle of those to be subdued exactly as they need. Idam guru ratna mandala kamniyatayami.
Very nice. Okay. So now, as always, we set ourselves, we now remind ourselves of our reliance on the Buddha and the Dharma, for those of us who figure we are already Buddhists, the first two lines. And the second two lines are stating our purpose, stating our motivation for doing what we do. And we're going to be probably talking about that today, which is the meaning of karma. It's very important to understand. We'll discuss this, that whatever we think determines the character of the thing we do. You know, the mind causes it to be what it is. It's a very powerful view in Buddhism. So this motivation here is saying we're going to listen to these teachings to take some tools from it to help us become a Buddha so we can benefit others. This is the long-term goal. So just having that thought causes this action of listening to the teachings to become exactly a cause for that. That's a very marvelous idea. Sangye charang soke chognam la jangcho badu dagni kyap suchi dagi chernyen gi personam ki drola penche sangye drupa shok sangye charang soke chognam la jangcho badu dagni kyap suchi dagi chernyen gi personam ki drola penche sangye drupa shok Sangye charang soke chognam la jangcho badu dagni kyap suchi dagi chernyen gi personam ki drola penche sangye drupa shok. Okay, this is good. I'm sorry, I've got a bit of a cold today, so I'm going to be blowing my nose all the time. I'm a bit croaky, so I hope we don't run out of voice. So, okay. Let me put gallery view on. I don't want to look at myself. That would be rather silly, wouldn't it? Gallery, so I can see all of you people, which is much better. Okay, very good. Good. Happy to see you all, everybody, wherever you might be. So nice to see everybody's names as well. It's wonderful. I like Zoom. It's not the same as being with each other, but it's kind of something good about it. It's very personal. I feel it's very personal. I enjoy it. I'll start already, excuse me. Okay, so what we're talking about here, in the simple way that I put it, I mean, I'm not giving it's clear I'm not giving an extensive, extensive step-by-step detailed description of the Lamrim, which is what is in the literature, these marvelous, precise, clear bullet points, details. All I can do, and I find it's like a useful addition, maybe, we do the proper study, than just trying to get the experience, get a taste, for the different stages, putting it into our down-to-earth words, trying to get a taste for the different. The crucial one is to understand that the way this presentation, the way this, entire presentation of Buddhist teachings, the path to enlightenment, is presented is in an orderly, experiential way. So I think initially that's quite hard for us to see. When I first heard these teachings from Lama Zopa Rinpoche, I had absolutely no conception of where I could begin with this. How could I make this experiential? What does it mean it's in stages? I had no concept, So I think it takes us time. So what I try to convey, what I want to try and convey is seeing these different levels of practices, why the first level of practice you need to learn about karma, why the second one you need to learn about your mind, why the third is learning about bodhicitta. We have to understand the logic behind this. And all of it's referring to our capacity as a student on this path, So it's logical, we know, that if you do the first level of practice, as we know very well, as Lama Zopa would politely put it, honouring the lineage, he would say the first stages of the practices are those teachings and practices suitable to the disciple of the least capability. Well, this is why I like to call it junior school, it's kind of immediately we get something there. Then you've got middle capability, high school. And then you've got compassion wing. A bird needs two wings, wisdom and compassion. And the first two scopes, the first two, junior school and high school, are the wisdom wing. And this is all the nuts and bolts. This is the essence of this. This is the nuts and bolts of all the Buddhist teachings that we need to utilize in order to begin to develop our own amazing potential. In other words, we are the main beneficiary of this first stages of practice. We've just begun with, we've just begun looking into this the components of the first stages. We are the direct beneficiary of this. Our motivation is bodhicitta, no question, but we are the direct beneficiary, the character of this level of practice, which is about learning to subdue our body, our speech, which is junior school, and then our mind, which is high school. This is the work we do, taking on board the nuts and bolts of all Buddha's instructions, which we will see articulated in the Four Noble Truths. What is suffering? There is suffering. There are causes. You can get free of it, and how to do it. So we are the direct beneficiary of this. In another way of putting it, this is the retreat mode. The best way to do all this is to go up into the mountains, give up sex, drugs, and rock and roll, give up husbands and children and mortgages, and fully dedicate yourself to the work of transforming your body, speech, and mind, at least into the body, speech, and mind of a totally subdued, blissful, radiant, renounced person who's begun seriously to renounce suffering and its causes. We are the beneficiaries of this. We are the beneficiaries. But obviously, indirectly, as Lama Zopa says, other sentient beings will benefit. All the rats and cockroaches will hold a party because we're leaving them in peace, It's a really crucial one to understand. This first stage is junior school and high school, the wisdom wing, the first and second scopes of the Lamrim, and we're not finished that yet. We've hardly begun it. Today, we're going to do get to the culmination of junior school. So far, we've talked about the necessity for a guru, which Tsongkhapa talks about. Then we've talked about, even before that, as Lama Zopa would always teach, taking him as our precedent when he started teaching, foreigners like us, learning that the mind is beginningless. The mind is not physical. The mind doesn't come from mummy and daddy. The mind is not brain. The mind doesn't come from a creator. The mind is not the handiwork of a creator, for example. This is crucial. Then thinking we need a teacher, and we looked into that a little bit, and then looking into the preciousness of this life, wishing not to waste it, and then beginning, as we did last week, beginning entry level, junior school, grade 1 of the first scope, junior school, understanding that this precious life, which we don't want to waste, is actually really fragile. It's going to end at any moment. So we looked into death. So all of this is taken from Buddha's teachings, but they're presented in this way, kontratisha and then tsongkhapa, in a way that to prime our mind. So we're not even beginning to technically practice yet. We're beginning to prime our mind to get us ready to start to practice, which we're going to get into today. So all that's junior school. This is completely about you subduing your body. This is the beginnings of it. We're going to get to it now, which is karma, where we begin to control our body, our speech, and then and later on our mind. Why? Because they're driving us to make us crazy and running around harming sentient beings and causing ourselves a mess, causing ourselves suffering. So this is for our benefit. We find this hard to hear in our culture. Oh, that sounds selfish. For our benefit, we say. Which means we don't understand. So we're going to emphasize this all the time. So we're going to do this, today, looking into the next step after you've thought about impermanence and death. What does that lead you to? What is the next step what is the next step we have to utilize to give ourselves a wake-up call, not to want to waste this precious life? This is what we're discussing right here. This is why we're looking at impermanence right now. Last week we talked about more than just merely death, because it's taken from Buddha's extensive literature on impermanence, including subtle impermanence, which is a really subtle point, which can only be cognized in subtle meditation. But the real point that our teacher makes and Tsongkhapa's making is to give us the wake-up call not to waste this precious life, which we thought about, because it's a rare opportunity to have. We don't see it like that. We think we're this big lump of me plodding through life, and we think life is miserable. I'm miserable. We don't see ourselves as a precious resource, which is what we are. So we've done that one. And then we've thought, well, given that I don't want to waste this precious life, what am I going to do? I'm going to enter into the path. So we've entered the junior school grade 1 entry level, where now our teacher gets us increase our wake-up call to think about impermanence. This precious life will end at any moment. And this is going to give us an even more sense of urgency at the time of death, as we concluded last week. At the time of death, what's important? Bottom line, not all the things right now, if we look into our lives, all the time, all the things we think about in daily life that totally preoccupy us, that do need attention. The houses need cleaning, children need feeding, body needs looking after. We need sleep, we need clothing, we need work, all of this bubble of our life. And this is not criticizing, it's just looking at us, getting the big picture. We spend all our lives thinking about maintaining this body and this life. This is the way we are. This is the suffering of samsara, So here, what we're trying to do is this first point, in entry level into the path itself. Before that was the preliminary practice of thinking about the preciousness of this life. Before that, we thought about the necessity for a teacher to guide us on the way. And before that, we thought about the beginningless nature of this mind of ours. So you start with a beginningless mind. I need someone, and it's true nature of Buddhahood. Well, I need a teacher to get me there. So we looked to the teacher. And now we start to think of the preciousness of this life and think, oh my God, conclusion, I don't want to waste it. Then we enter into the path. And now our teacher increases our wish not to waste it by thinking about the fragility of it. It will end at any moment. Oh my gosh, we think, my goodness, I better do something about this. I don't want to waste this precious life. So we thought about impermanence and death. Now, what does this lead us to? The next step, we're not even beginning to practice yet. This is Tsongkhapa priming our minds. And the next point is, and this is one that's really difficult for our culture, I'm going to now look at the possibilities of the types of rebirth that I could have when I do die, which is not, the time of which is not certain. So here we have to look at Buddha's, entire, the scope of Buddha's view of all sentient beings and the types of rebirth he would say that he has found from his own direct observation to be the way the reality is. So, we're in samsara. So samsara, I think I might have mentioned this already. So now we start to look at the likely possibility of some types of rebirth that would not be ideal, will be nothing like the one that we've got now, which would make it impossible to practice. And so the energy from this next one, the wake-up call is, the action point is, I must not waste this precious life, because I certainly do not want to be born in the lower realms as an animal or whatever, because I have no opportunity to practice. So the overview of the point of this contemplation, we'll go into this a bit now, is I must not waste this life. So it's increasing our wish, our sense of urgency not to waste this precious resource, because we will die, don't know when, and it's possible to have really suffering rebirths. Well, why is that? Why is that possible? What's Buddha's view? This is his big picture view here. There are trillions of sentient beings, Buddha says. This is the way the universe is. There's not an atom of space you won't find sentient beings. Wherever there are computers and lamps and tables and are pervaded, as long as there are the four elements there, it is a conducive environment for the existence of sentient beings. There are trillions upon trillions of sentient beings. The ones we can see even with a microscope, that's the animal realm. The other ones, looking like us, are the humans. That is two of the realms of rebirth. Buddha would assert a much more suffering realm, which is the predominance of attachment energy, which is the so-called spirit realm, trillion times more occupied than the animals, which includes all those little bugs, not to mention the elephants and the kangaroos. The animal realm was a predominance of ignorance energy, the three poisons, ignorance energy, the attachment. The spirit realm was is a predominance of attachment energy. And these are these disembodied beings whose bodies are basically made of air. Think of it like that. We're all conjoined with the four elements. We all, samsara is just sentient beings who are mind possessors, and we're all in different experience, having different experiences, and the different realms, quote unquote, are simply types of rebirth where our mind is conjoined with a certain level of physical energy. It's just the way it is, So you've got the spirits, trillions of them, and even more than that, the hell realms, which is a predominance of anger energy. So because the three poisons run the entire universe, the three toxic emotions are the source of all the other delusions. This is Buddhist psychology. This causes, due to karma, which we're going to get to in a second, us to take certain kind of experiences. We are the boss. We're going to get to karma in a minute, which is that. So we'll get to that one. So the point here is, which is, again, like I said, not comfortable for our minds, is to consider the possibility of the types of rebirths that are most suffering and a strong wish to increase this wake-up call. We're going to increase the wake-up call. I must not waste this precious human rebirth, which has so many opportunities. I increase my wish. Not only will I, first it's precious. Then I think, oh my goodness, I could die at any moment. It increases our wish not to waste it. And now we even further increase our wish not to waste it by looking at the possibilities of other types of rebirth. This is the logic behind it psychologically. So of course it's very different. We don't think this way in our culture, not at all, not in the slightest. So then what makes sense to us? This is quite difficult. So forget about hells and spirits, okay? Maybe we've got to really think about it. And there is logic to all this. It's all in the text. It's all there. The logic is all there for why this is possible. But here, that's not so much the issue, but for us, we need some logic. So never mind even other realms of existence. Let's look at the ones that are called animals. This, I think, is a really important teaching for us in our culture, where we're so attached to certain types of animals, as if they're really, and so we have attachment. Only to some kinds, pussies and doggies and poodles, a few of those maybe we're very attached to. Well, we're attached to wildlife as well. We're not attached to rats. We're not attached to mosquitoes who dare to take one tiny, tiny drop of my precious blood. So we're happy to slaughter them. So we can already see how we're the ones we have attachment to, the ones we have compassion for. The ones we have compassion for are only those we're attached to. It's pretty evident. Shows how narrow-minded we are. That's not the issue here. So the issue here is to try and think about the suffering of being born as an animal. This is a really hard one for us, Many of us prefer animals. Many of us think humans are creeps, and I'd rather be born a poodle. I'd rather be born a dog. I'd rather be born a bird, all this kind of thinking. So what's Buddha's thinking here? This is food for thought for us. This is using Buddhist psychology, Buddha's view. We're talking Buddhism here. So let's look at Buddha's view, shall we? So, the point of, if you want we hear about how Buddha says it's good to have a human body, best to have a human birth. Best of a bad lot. It's not the best, but it's the best of a bad lot, put it that way. So we should look at why. It's not an absolute statement of a hierarchy. It's not like saying, oh, humans are better. Not like that. It's contingent. It's a dependent arising. So why would Buddha be telling us it's better to have a human body than a dog body? Why? It's very simple. It's not emotional. It's not critical. It's not negative. It's not judgmental. It's a simply fairly clear point. So, if you want a long neck, it's be born with a long neck. Definitely aspire to be a giraffe. You can't do better than a giraffe. And I'm not joking here. If you want to be very small, be an ant. And there are much smaller ones than ants. So we'll find out what the causes are to be born an ant, and you'll be born an ant. No problem, because karma takes care. We're getting to karma. If you want a long neck, find the causes of getting a long neck and create those causes, and you'll become a giraffe. No problem. If you want to be strong and a lot of hair on your body and very fierce and have very big claws and be able to rip the guts out of buffaloes for breakfast every morning, please be a mummy lion. They do the hard work. The daddies just lie back and eat the breakfast. If you want to live underground and be a rat and have very long, strong teeth and have lots of sex and live underground, have very strong teeth, be a rat, please. Then find out the causes to be born a rat and go ahead, you'll become born a rat. No problem. Karma takes care. If you want to be born a poodle, which is really stupid, forgive me, a poodle, but they're very thick. They're very stupid little doggies, you know, with respect. But they're very cute. We know that. So you want to be cute and be shaved half your body by your owner and have calves livers for breakfast and have money in the bank and have hotels when your mummy goes away and you can stay in a hotel on a vacation and be a very happy, coddled little doggy. You be a poodle. No probs. But what if you want to think about the meaning of life? What if you want to understand suffering and its causes? What if you want to develop wisdom and develop passion? I think it's fairly evident you want to be born a human, please, folks. That's the logic, please. Don't be emotional about animals. We're so full of attachment, you know. Attachment, we conflate attachment with love. We are really gross in that mistake. Attachment overinflates the niceness, the goodness, the something of an object. So we grossly overinflate the deliciousness of our little doggy and our pussy and our birdie and our auntie and whatever it is. Not the mice, not the rats, not the ones that harm us. So think about it. It's a whole different approach, you know. It's not too difficult to prove. I mean, we talk about dolphins being intelligent. Please forgive me here. Don't be I'm not trying to be rude. Well, I know I sound rude all the time, but try and hear my point. We're very sentimental when we've discovered that dolphins are sort of intelligent, you know. Well, maybe they are. But talk to a dolphin about emptiness and understand the nature of the suffering and understand, get to have infinite empathy while it's eating its little fish for breakfast. Excuse me, it can't be so intelligent. It eats a live fish. They all do. That shows intense attachment. It shows intense fear. It shows intense aversion, anger, and but especially and a habit to kill. So that's not so intelligent. That's not so intelligent. Intelligence includes empathy. You can't separate intelligence from empathy. Look at the mummy lion. We love to revere wildlife, you know. It's very fascinating. I always remember one of those shows when that marvelous Attenborough man, who's about nearly 100, he's still going around the world doing all these shows about wildlife. He's amazing, you know, he's an amazing human being. I can't think of his first name, Richard Attenborough. He's got a brother who made movies, I think. Anyway, he's an extraordinary human being, full of compassion for the world, and he really is like insight into the world is, the way the world is, all the animals and everything, and how to protect, and exactly right. I remember the Dalai Lama was in tears one time talking about how now Tibet has just been destroyed environmentally. The animals used to almost be, the animals in Tibet were almost not wild because no one hurt them, you know. It was incredible. So anyway, the point here is, I remember watching this particular video, and it was this wonderful long shot, you know, of it. Dusk was coming, the sun was enormous going down, and it was this moving music and this long shot of all the animals, all the wild animals. You could see them in the shadow, you know, all running. It looked very delicious. And I thought to myself, I wonder why they're running. Wonder why they're running. Then I thought, well, they're not jogging for their evening jog like we would. They're running in terror. They're running in fear. They're running away from predators. Well, we don't see that. We make it romantic looking. I remember on the same show, this particular shot of close up, obviously a long way away. You couldn't hear the sound, but you could see the mummy lion stalking the buffalo for breakfast. And we love to look at this. We think it's so amazing. We watch what the lion does, and there's the babies over there waiting for breakfast, and there's this powerful mummy lion driven by her, you know, what's she doing? She's driving, she's running to get the buffalo. She gets the buffalo by the throat. You see the buffalo's mouth open, you see the eyes wide in absolute horror. You can't hear the sound, it's a long way away. And there she is ripping the throat of the buffalo. The buffalo dies, and then the babies come and they have a leisurely hot entrail breakfast. We bring the children, we call it nature. We bring the children in to watch. Oh, this is nature, darling. Now, I mean, I think that's romanticizing it. I think it's completely grotesque. What's going on there? Buddha says all sentient beings in the entire universe, from the hells to the gods to the Buddhas, have a mind. If you're in samsara, you're driven by ego grasping, which is this primordial, fear-based sense of a separate concrete me. And animals have this 1 billion times more strong than humans, 1 billion, easily. More terror, more fear. They live in it. It gives rise to unbelievable attachment to get what that fantasy I wants. We're all driven by this, but animals have it 1 billion times stronger. And there are these wild animals living in this nightmarish environment where they cannot rest for 1 second in peace because they're living in a war zone. They can be eaten and destroyed any second. That drives every action they do. We romanticize that. We make it look like, oh, that's nature. The suffering part, I mean. Then when the buffalo gets the breakfast, we call it natural. Well, what is natural? It's Buddha's view analysis of the mind. Buddha's analysis of the mind refers to every living being in the universe. It's not unique to humans. We're all driven by the 3 poisons. So, that's a lion. So, you try and imagine that if we're all driven by these delusions, we've all got the same delusions, but it's a question of degree. So can you imagine a human? So if you think of a mummy who's hungry and she has to feed her babies, and it's pretty instinctive. So if the only choice she has is to walk out on the street, stalk one of the neighbors, grab them by the throat, rip their throat out, destroy them, kill them, call the babies, and all settle down on the street and enjoy a hot breakfast while that neighbor is screaming in agony. Now, excuse me, that's the scenario here. The difference is we would be beyond, we can't even conceive of such level of behavior. We hear about all these torturers doing things in private. We're so horrified we can't even think about it, As karmic imprints, attachment, aggression, and ignorance. Just tick the boxes. Lion has them. The difference between humans and animals, if we're fortunate, we have some access to some of our virtues, some access to some empathy, some access. You wouldn't think so by looking at the human realm. Look at what we do, But the delusions that drive us are the delusions that drive the hell beings, are the delusions that drive the spirits, are the delusions that drive the animals. And the animals are vividly evident to us. So how about learning to interpret, use Buddha's model, if we're interested in Buddhism, use Buddha's model of the mind and karma to interpret that scenario of the buffalo being destroyed alive, screaming in agony, and being eaten alive for breakfast by the mummy lion. Use Buddha's analysis. All I'm doing here is using Buddha's analysis. So it's up to us to decide which is true, Well, guess what? What we're trying to point out here is, guess what? That's called suffering. But not only the buffalo, that's the only, also that's the point. When we think of suffering, and as we get to the next scope, next week, high school, when we start to go more deep and we go into the mind that drives all this, we're going to see I forgot the point. I lost the point there. I lost the point. We're going to get into the mind to see what drives this behavior. What drives this behavior? So as we can see with humans, we're bad enough, but at least we have access to our virtues, and that's what we're going to get into next week. We've at least got ability to think. When you see a creature, even when you see the ant, and you see you hurt it, we have some empathy. Not everybody. If you just think ants are creepy, and they're going to kill millions of them and billions of them, and you're going to have worms and billions of them, and you're going to kill all the creatures we don't like the rats and the cockroaches, or you go fishing and you see the people catching the lobsters and catching the fish, and the fish is dying in agony. This is karma now. We're going to get to karma today. When we see that we're driven by that, you're driven by that habit, then you're as blind as a bat and you can't see the suffering you're causing. Even humans do this in a most stupendous way. So forget about poor old Lion. Lion cannot access any of her virtue. She cannot access any goodness, any interdependence, any love, compassion. She's got instinct. Yes, she's got her babies. But if she's that hungry, she'll eat her babies. So that's instinct. That's past karma of karmic connection. The mummy will be kind to her babies. That's driven by karma. So it's just learning to see it in a different way. That's a lion, okay? So yeah, our concept of suffering is interesting. We'll get to that when we get to the Four Noble Truths. But here we're talking the grossest level of suffering. So it's fairly evident from the grossest level of suffering point of view that the buffalo is the one who's suffering. But listen to this. I find this really fascinating. If we see that, Rottweiler kill a baby, eat someone's face, what do we do to the Rottweiler? Instantly we kill it, don't we? A monster, you must kill that dog, a monster. It dared to kill a human. Even if it kills someone else's little baby pussy, or even someone's little poodle, we will kill the Rottweiler. Because we only think of suffering as being the one who gets hurt. The same with our human realm. We only think of the person who is the victim, because that's the understanding of the first kind of suffering. But when we understand the Four Noble Truths and all levels of suffering, then we will have 1 billion times more compassion for the lion, because she is just driven by her past karma to kill. That's how come she got a lion body. She created the cause. She created the cause for a totally appropriate body. Us ladies, when I used to have long red nails, try ripping the guts out of a buffalo for breakfast with your red long nails. They are too gentle. These hands are made for virtue, His Holiness said. Isn't that so sweet? These are made for helping others. But look at the lions, and where do you think she came from? We're going to talk about Ka in a minute. She created the cause. She completely molded herself into the mind of a lion before she died, and then she ran like a magnet to a lion mummy and got a suitable body to rip the guts out of buffaloes every day for breakfast. Her mind created that. Her intense negative actions, intense negative karma of anger, aggression, of killing, enormous attachment, and a body that's suitable to do that. She made herself. So she is creating every second intense karma, negative karma, when she's causing that suffering. Of course, the buffalo, when it eats its babies, whatever it does to get food, it's doing the same. So the animal realm is the most nightmarish suffering, the grossest suffering and the subtler suffering of the mind, the intensity of the suffering of the mind. So Lama Zopa said one time, a friend of mine told me this is years ago, that if we just could, for a moment, have a direct cognition, a direct experience, which means you be a yogi, which means you have clairvoyance. Just for a moment, have a direct experience of the mind of your little dog, your cute little doggy woggy, your pussy wussy cat, who you think is so cute and so sweet and so lovely. And they are. But if you could have a direct insight into their mind, which means their ego grasping, the billion times heavier, intense sense of a self, which is fear in its nature, which gives rise to intense, unbelievable emotional hunger of attachment, which gives intense rise to aversion and all the other delusions, 1 billion times stronger than us humans. Rinpoche said, if you could just for a moment have a direct cognition of that experience of that dog's mind, you'd be so horrified at the nightmare of the suffering. You'd never want to waste another millisecond of this precious human rebirth. So all of these things that I'm saying here are either all made up by some maniac called Buddha or some other weird person, or these are the direct experiences of the beings who've become Buddha or even on the way to becoming Buddha. This is the view. This is Buddha's view. So it's forget the spirits, forget the hell realms. This is just the animals, they're right in front of us. So to think about this, to try and understand this, think about this. And what's the action point here? Thank you very much. I do not want to be born an ant, a dog, a rat, a poodle, even if it's a rich one, or a lion, not to mention. This is interesting too. In the Lam Rim, they talk about the majority of all the animal realm are living in the depths of darkness, crammed next up on top of each other. This is like the ultimate in the absolute ignorance, which is the predominant delusion of the animal realm. Well, I remember years ago in the New York Times science pages, they talked about how we are now finding billions of species, new species, not even creatures, billions of new species of creatures in the depths of the ocean where we believed once they could not be living there, in the complete and total darkness, piled high on top of each other. That's the actual nightmare of the suffering of the animal realms. Like the dogs and the rats and the giraffes and the kangaroos are like living in the God realm of the animals, if you like, on the top of the earth, That's the actual nightmare of the suffering, of the ignorance of the animal realm. So, you know, just to contemplate this. That's it. That's what the point here is, to think, do I want that? First, we have to posit a possibility, which of course is not easy for us in the West, but all the literature is there to describe the logic of how this is so. Don't just believe it and get nervous. That's childish. Take it as your working hypothesis. So what's the action point here from this point of the Lam Rim? Thank you very much, but no thank you. That's it, you know. So I think I'd like some questions from this. All the implications of thinking about animals like this now, seeing them in terms of their suffering. Are there any questions? Don't have to be. I'm just curious if there are. Any old thing.
Yes.
You can argue with me. Go on.
Basu has one. Basu,
Good.
could you
What's the
please,
question, darling? Yes, Basu. What's your question? Happy to see you again.
I have a very simple question. So you mentioned that animals of the lower rim, like dogs, cats, and lions, their birth is actually of lower category and they have a lot of suffering. So I was wondering,
That's right.
if they don't have any karma, how one gets out of that realm?
I understand. It's a very good point, Basu, and it's rather depressing, but still, there's, you know, the point is this. First of all, that lion's mind, like yours, goes back and back and back and back and back. That lion, like you, has had many human rebirths and has created lots of virtue. And those karmic seeds also are still in their mind. At the moment, as a lion, they're like the flowers underneath, and the weeds of the lion birth have taken over. So those seeds are still there. That lion still possesses Buddha nature. That lion has had human lives. That lion has seeds of compassion and seeds of kindness. But as a lion, they can't ripen very much. Do you understand my point? But they are there. So that means, you know, that's the first point. But the second point, Bashu, we've all been lions and dogs and tigers, Buddha would say, in countless past lives. So if we are now a human, it shows at least logically we must have done one birth at the time of a death, one seed must have triggered. So we have managed to now get a human mummy, and we've now got this opportunity. So that the opportunity is always there. And so the main learning from this, from our point of view as humans, is to try to help animals. So you can't help animals by teaching them about emptiness or compassion, but you can say mantras in their ears. You can protect them from suffering. I mean, this is what compassion would lead us to try and let them hear the Dharma. One of the most precious ways to help animals, and I don't know if we talked about this last week when we talked about death, but this is a major one, and this is certainly in Lama Zopa's book, How to Face Death Without Fear. A major one we can do is to help animals die peacefully. Or if you see an ant that's suffering and looks like it's dying, get it out of the way, put it in a safe place, blow mantras on the ant, and that can bless its little mind. So there are things we can do to help the ant, help encourage its own virtuous karma to be triggered when it dies, so it will then get a human birth. But of course, we don't meet that many animals to be able to do this, but we do the best we can. But this is the tragedy of once, you know, that you've got that animal birth, and you've got no access to anything good, you're going to have a lot of suffering. And that karma has got to run out like a petrol tank. And then like a miracle, one day, one of their other karmas might be triggered and they'll get a human body again. So it's possible, that's the point. But it's kind of not nice. Do you understand, Basu? Yeah. What else, people? Questions? I mean, we in the West don't like this view at all. It makes us very miserable. Are there any questions? More questions? Are there more questions there? Talia.
Is there more questions?
If not, it's fine. I'll keep going. Okay, let's keep going.
Okay.
But the real learning here, this is the point, Bashu, and all of us, the real learning here, which is hard for us, the real learning in this level of practice is this is a wake-up call for me. This is a wake-up call for me. Of course, have compassion as well, but that's not the main issue here. The main issue is like compassion for yourself. Oh my God, I've got this precious human rebirth. Conclusion, I mustn't waste it. Then what do? I then start to think about how death will come at any time. Increase my wish not to waste it. Now I think of all the possibilities of the type of rebirth when I do die, the time which is not certain, then the conclusion again is I must not waste this human rebirth. I must not waste. So now we're moving towards beginning to practice. Each of these steps is priming our mind to get to the point where we will now actually want to do the actual practice, which will prevent this type of suffering. So the next step is when we think, oh my goodness, well, if this is a possibility, well, whom can I turn to? Where can I get the methods that will prevent this type of rebirth when I die, the time of which is uncertain? So this next logical step, as presented in the Lam Rim, we now talk about refuge. We now talk about return, relying on the doctor. It's like the analogy is you first of all, you've got some sickness, but secondly, you've thought about the likely possibilities of future sickness. So the natural logical conclusion is, well, whom can I turn to? Whom can I rely upon to give me medicine to prevent this suffering? And the Buddhists use this analogy all the time of medicine. The Buddha's a doctor. And this gets us now, again, we've talked about this, but again, it's really crucial to be clear about this. What is the relationship we would have with the Buddha? So I always quote that I was a Catholic. I was brought up a Christian. I loved God. I was in love with God. I thought about God all the time. I thought about Our Lady, the saints, all of these things. I loved thinking about all of this. So then, of course, my relationship with God was as my creator. This is totally appropriate. So my creator, the creator of the universe, is the boss, speaking very simply. Therefore, doing God's wishes, doing God's will is my job. And so then I have to have this relationship with God, and then I do God's wishes, because if not, I'll get punished. But so my reliance upon God is faith, devotion, because I have faith in God, because God has got a plan. God knows what's going on. God made the universe after all. So that's a very powerful, very specific relationship to have with the creator. So what's my relationship with Buddha? There's many similarities. You depend upon the Buddha. Buddha's your doctor. Buddha's not, but he's not a creator. Buddha doesn't assert a creator. There's no concept like that in Buddhism, speaking simply because we don't need creating. Buddha's view, like we talked about at the very beginning, he asserts that all consciousnesses, he doesn't have another word like soul or spirit or atman or essence, like the Greeks call it. No, our mind is this beginningless and endless continuity, this impermanent continuity of mental moments that goes back and back and back and will go forward, forward, forward. So in a simple sense, we don't need creating because our mind has always existed. This is an insane idea to us. This is a demented idea. If we're materialists, it sounds hilarious. And if we're Christian, it sounds shocking. Or Muslim, whatever. But this is Buddha's view. All we can do is tell you what Buddha's view is, So we don't need creating by anybody. We're going to get into karma in a minute. This is the next step. We create ourselves, basically. But we're first turning to whom can we turn to? Whose methods can I use to stop this future suffering? I don't want suffering. Thank you very much. This is the first kind of suffering. We'll learn about the different levels of suffering when we get to the next level of practice next week. When we get to high school, we get to the middle scope of the teachings, where we start to understand the deeper level of the Four Noble Truths, the deeper levels of suffering. Right now, we're just dealing with the grossest level of suffering. Thank you very much. I don't want to be born an animal. I don't want to be born a rat. I don't want to be born a dog or a lion, etc., etc. Why? Why? Because I don't want that kind of mind. I don't want to have that kind of suffering. Thank you very much. It's very simple. It's not, it's very simple. That's the logic behind it, which of course takes us time to think. So whom can I turn to? Well, here we're discussing the Buddha. This is the person whose teachings we are presenting here, not Jesus, not Freud, not Lenin. It's Buddha's view of suffering. It's Buddha's view of the universe. And that's up to us. We don't have to follow Buddha, but this is what we're discussing in these classes, Buddha's view. Very simple. So what does it mean rely upon the Buddha? Well, let's assume there is a person called a doctor who has studied all the medicines in the universe, who studied all the systems in the universe, who knows about every suffering in the universe and knows exactly all the solutions to all those sufferings. Well, that's a pretty nice person to rely upon. You'd think, well, thank you. I don't want to be sick. I better turn to somebody who's reliable. That's a very nice doctor to rely upon. Well, here the analogy is the Buddha. The Buddha is said to be completely omniscient, has removed all delusions from the mind, sees everything as it is, sees all minds as they are, understands the karma of all sentient beings, beginninglessly and endlessly, has infinite compassion, and has the power to manifest in countless bodies throughout space to benefit me. Well, that's the idea. So we're thinking of turning to the Buddha here. So we need to have confidence. Don't just believe this nice-looking Indian man behind us looking very holy in his meditation. That's silly. Check up on his history, check up who he is, check up his teachings, look at him, find out. So there's three things you rely upon. Here they refer to it as taking refuge. It's a very sweet phrase. You take refuge in something, you rely upon it. So here we're going to look at what the Buddha is and how we rely upon the Buddha. Not just the Buddha, but his Dharma, and not just the Dharma, but his Sangha. So the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha. They call it the three jewels, I remember a friend of mine who first met her Lama. He was Song Rinpoche. This is like 40 years ago. And she'd never heard any Buddhism, not one single word. And she met this Lama. She sort of liked him immediately. So she went and had a private meeting with him. And he gave her a complete teaching on the Buddhist, on all about taking refuge. But she had no idea what he was talking about, because it was a typical Tibetan teaching on a typical thing. So she didn't know what a Buddha meant. She didn't know what the Dharma meant. She didn't know what the Sangha meant. She had to ask the question in the end, after the entire teaching, well, excuse me, what's refuge in what? Because we don't use these concepts, you know. She was an American or English or something. So we have to understand what the Buddha is. So these three jewels, this is what we rely upon. And at some point in our practice, when we decide we are formally Buddhists, we would formalize this reliance, this refuge, by quote unquote taking refuge formally in front of somebody who represents the Buddha for us. So the Buddha is this word that refers to the actual enlightened mind of a person who's become a Buddha. There's not just one Buddha, this is the point. There's Mr. Buddha of 2,500 years ago, whom we identify as this Indian man, the statue behind me, right? He came out of this amazing Indian system, was extraordinary, all these different amazing philosophies and that were existing at the time, which we in the West are only now really discovering, which I think indeed even the Indian people are discovering their own amazing history. Many of them have given it up, you know, and now the Indians themselves, the Dalai Lama says you're so happy to be able to repay the kindness of India, because this is where the Buddha first became, and then the Tibetans came to India and were accepted by Pandit Nehru 40 years ago, 50, 60 years ago now, isn't it? So I said, even now the Indians over the centuries have lost their traditions. They're all becoming computer scientists and becoming, you know, whatever. Nothing wrong with that, isn't it, Basu? Are you Indian, Basu? Yes, right. So it's only ironic to see Dalai Lama now, who's bringing back through the Tibetan system, because they study all these great Indian scholars, these Buddhist scholars in the 7th, 8th, 9th century, you know. But before Buddha, though, there was an amazing system in India, incredibly sophisticated thinkers and scholars and yogis, unbelievable. And Buddha came out of all of that and then he diverged in his own direction. As the Dalai Lama always says, it was these amazing Indians more than 3,000 years ago who were the ones who began the investigation into the nature of self. And they went a super sophisticated level of throwing off all the rubbish. And the Buddha went as far as he could go, but then he felt that they hadn't gone far enough. So he diverged in his own direction. Now we have what's called Buddhism. And the key point upon which he diverged, was the nature of self. That's where Buddha has his own particular teachings, which is emptiness. And we'll get to that at the end on our final day. So anyway, we need to check on the Buddha, as he even said himself when he was there, at the time he was teaching. He says, don't just believe what I tell you. I use the analogy of checking a piece of gold. You wouldn't just accept that it's gold, you'd analyze it. And this is a crucial point. You need to have faith. If you've gone to your doctor for the first time, you don't know all the knowledge your doctor's got. You've checked up on the doctor, you've got confidence, but you've got to have faith in his advice. It's pretty obvious, but not based on stupidity. You don't choose a doctor because they're cute looking. You choose a doctor because you've done your market research. That's the same with the Buddha. But the faith we have, the confidence, confide, the Latin, with faith, with trust, is based on intelligence. You read the Buddha, you check the teachings. And these days, of course, you see living examples like the Dalai Lama. You couldn't wish for anybody better to be a living example of all these teachings. That's very encouraging. So that's the Sangha, if you think about it. So the Buddha is the person who lived in India, and you check up, you read his teaching, you get some confidence. But then you need to rely not just on the Buddha. You can have Buddha looking very handsome, looking at you every day. But if you don't listen to his teachings, his words, you're in trouble. So the Dharma, which is the teachings of the Buddha, which is the medicine, basically. You can have a nice doctor looking at you every day. You need to hear their advice, and the advice is the medicine. That's the actual the thing we rely upon is the advice, Buddha's teachings. Every word you're hearing here is Buddha's teachings, which is the advice you put into practice. But the third one is you need other people doing the job. You need the spiritual community. They're the living examples for you of the efficacy of the teachings. If you're studying music, you can't just read a piece of paper with Bach's music on it. It's too dry. You need you need to hear the music, and you need to have the other students. It gives you courage, the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha. So we check up on these things. We have extensive teachings on these things. We can't only talk about it briefly here in our class. So that's up to us Buddha can't shove his thoughts down our throat. We have to read, think about, analyze, debate, listen to, discuss. So then you rely upon that doctor. You do your market research, you do your due diligence, and then you rely upon that doctor with confidence. And when they give you the advice, which you can't understand yet because it's advanced, you will take it because you've checked they're a valid person. This is very reasonable behavior. This is refuge on the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha. They talk about when you take refuge, they talk about the absolute Buddha, the absolute Dharma, and the absolute Sangha. Then you've got the relative Buddha, the relative Dharma, and the relative Sangha. So what does that mean? Well, the actual Buddha, this is indicated by the Sanskrit word dharmakaya. It's translated here as truth body. But of course, it's not physically what we think of as a body, but that's the actual enlightened mind of a person. Let's say Shakyamuni Buddha, this person behind us. His mind is the enlightened mind of a Buddha. That's the actual Buddha. By the time he became a Buddha, he doesn't need a body. He doesn't need a bag of bones. You don't need one at that level. Your mind is pure and is unmanifest, all-knowing, all-compassionate, all-wise, all-pervasive. That's Buddha. It's a bit similar to the Christians talking about God, actually, that God is everywhere. It's not the same. There's no equivalence, but it's similar, because Buddha would argue with the difference between the qualities of a creator and the qualities of Buddha. That's another discussion. Well, it's a similar discussion. So that's the actual Buddha. But what good is that to peanuts like you and me? We need a person looking like us, speaking like us, sounding like us, whom we can hear, because we're not subtle enough. So that's the relative Buddha. So the shape, the human body, Mr. Buddha of India, 2,500 years ago, that human body, that person embodied, that's the Rupakaya, the form body. That's the relative Buddha. And of course, that's the one we rely upon. Well, this is, again, don't think it's too cosmic, but if you think about music, think about this, the actual mind of Bach is the musician, the actual mind, isn't it? But he needs to be in a body that looks like you and me so he can talk to us. That's the relative Bach, the human being. Think of it like that. Then you've got the Dharma. Well, the actual Dharma, the actual music, think of this, the actual music, the knowledge about music is in Bach's mind, not his fingers, his mind. But we can't access his mind. So how kind of him, they've got this clever language in music, haven't they? These little notations with little red, this complex musical language. He writes it down on a piece of paper so that I can now read it, learn it, internalize it, and become my own Bach. We get this, That's the Dharma, the words, the power of words. That's Buddha's main gift, is his speech. The concepts. The notes on the paper are not music, but by learning it, you can make it music. The words on the paper, the words coming out the mouth aren't music, aren't Dharma itself. It's when we utilize it and transform it and make it music. So the second refuge is the Dharma, the Buddha's speech, the instructions. Pretty clear. The doctor, he can look at you very handsome. Sweet doctor smiling at you every day. But if he doesn't speak and give you advice, what good is it? Same here. That's the Dharma. That's the real refuge. Then you've got the Sangha. We need that. You can't just sit there playing in isolation. You can't play tennis on your own. You need other tennis players. You can't, you need other support, other people like you who are practicing. So the absolute Buddha is the unmanifest mind. The absolute Dharma is the knowledge in that mind of the Dharma. The absolute Sangha are called Arya beings, superior beings. Anybody, not just the Buddhas, but those who realize emptiness, all of those, all the way up the path to Buddhahood, they are the actual Sangha. But that could be the homeless person around the corner. That could be your ugly old auntie. You can't tell, because she could be a high being. You don't know that. Tibetans have a saying, you don't know who anybody is, so please don't judge. So that's the absolute Sangha, the holy beings, the Arya beings who are on this planet practicing becoming a Buddha, or even the Buddhas. But what is the relative Sangha? Well, that for the Buddha is his spiritual community, and that's that's those living in the fullness of the vows of Lord Buddha's Vinaya, all his teachings about behavior, about vows and things. So that's the monks and nuns living in full ordination. So the Buddha's view is that the presence in any one place of at least 4 fully ordained monks or nuns is the criterion of the existence of living Dharma in that place. That's why from the Buddhist teachings, the existence of living humans living in the vows is the actual criterion of the existence of the living Dharma, which is why the Sangha is considered to be so important. That's the Buddha Dhamma Sangha, whom we rely upon, whom we take refuge in, when we formalize that, when we become a Buddhist. So any questions about that?
Yes, Venerable. In the chat, we got 3 questions, but perhaps we go back a little bit because the question came in a bit later after you started on taking refuge.
It's not about refuge, it's before refuge, is it?
Yes, slightly before. Yeah.
So
the question, one question is, what is the Buddhist views on evolution?
Evolution, that's a very interesting question. Okay, I'll try and tell you in my way of understanding Buddhism. I'll try and explain it to you. Okay, good point, thank you. I have to blow my nose again. I'm so sorry, you people. So rude of me. Okay, let me try and explain how I understand it. So this is coming to karma, which we hopefully want to talk about today. But I've got a feeling we have to bring that over to next week as well, because there's so much to talk about with karma. We'll get there in the end. How many more classes have we got left, Talia?
We actually have, so this is only the 4th. We got 12.
Oh, okay. Oh, we've got lots of time. I can rave on then like a maniac. Okay, good. Good. Okay, wonderful.
So much time to spend with you. That's great.
Okay, good. So this is bringing in the idea of karma. We'll go into that in more detail. Okay, so now evolution. I think what we mean by evolution, it's based solely, is it not, on the view that we're discussing physical matter. Anybody who's a scientist, let me know if I'm wrong here, but it's discussing physical matter only, the bodies of tigers and the bodies of ants and the bodies of humans and the brains and the nervous system. Are we correct there? Because the scientific view at the moment does not posit anything that's like a soul, or certainly does not posit the view like Buddha does, that our consciousness is not physical. So, okay, so that's the first point. So obviously, by looking at the outside world, it's true to say we can see over the centuries, and when they do all their digs and they pick up the earlier bodies of humans and they pick up the bones of other animals, we can see that there is a change over the centuries. The bodies seem to change, and what they do is they adapt to their environment. So they turn into different bodies. Maybe sometimes they had 4 fingers and now they've got 5. And we can see that. And that's completely logical. There's no problem with that. Buddha would not, if he talked about this to Buddha, he would not disagree with that. That's the physical. It's true. But this is the point to try and get our heads around. Okay. That lizard, let's say, that mummy lizard, for example, let's say that mummy lizard has a baby. So that mummy lizard, from the Buddha's perspective, isn't just the physical lizard with a brain, lizard brain and lizard whatever. It is who it is with its body and its behavior. But it has a baby. Well, that baby lizard, that was a consciousness that was not a lizard's consciousness. It could have been a human, or it could have been, if before humans came on this planet, it might have been another lizard, on the other side of the earth. Or maybe it was a dog or a lion or whatever the bodies of those beings they had in those days before humans came along. But I'm even discussing humans. I'll get there. But let's say it was another type of being altogether. Let's say it's another type of being altogether. But remember this. Buddha's also asserting in this whole view of samsara that there are way back then, and have been beginninglessly, there have been spirits in the spirit realm. There have been hell beings in the hell realm. There have been gods in the god realm. Right at that time, 1,000 years ago, when that lizard had a baby. So that lizard a being who's just finished their rebirth in the God realms, where they had a subtle light body, where they were living in complete bliss and joy, but finally their virtue ran out, their petrol tank of virtue ran out, that spirit finished in the God realms, the karma ripened to be born in the belly of that lizard in a place that's now called Alice Springs in Australia in the Red Desert. So that God realm being ran like a magnet and leapt into that lizard mummy's egg and sperm or whatever they had and turned in. So in other words, turned into a lizard. So they joined, now they left the God realm house and they moved into a lizard house. So what do now? They behave like a lizard. So of course they're going to start, even then that little baby lizard, maybe being a clever lizard, she'll start changing her behavior because she doesn't like the certain way her mummy did things. So she starts adjusting her body. Then that little lizard then has a baby. And the baby from that lizard might well have been in the hell realms and suddenly leapt into the baby lizard's mind, the baby lizard's body, and now it will help adjust the lizard behavior, the lizard house. So lizards are real and lizards do grow their bodies. But a hell being one day as a lizard, a God realm person comes in and hops into the lizard, and then when the lizard dies, it might go to a hell being rebirth. So these minds are all jumping around, entering into these different houses called lion houses and lizard houses and human houses. And of course they do their adjusting, they do their housekeeping while they're in that body, which indeed changes the physical behavior of that being. That's how I describe evolution. How does that sound? Does it make sense, people, as a concept? Can you get it?
Yes.
Good. Okay. So, all we're talking here is you don't want a lizard body, so be careful. You want another, at least it doesn't. And this is, by the way, bringing for me a very fascinating point. This is my own thinking. Think about this. They don't discuss this much in the Lam Rim. They just talk about we are the humans, but they always talk about how at the moment, the human realm is a very gross, very degenerate rebirth. So what do they mean by that? Well, they say eons ago, listen to this, if minds are beginningless, right there, if minds are beginningless, and if this view of the Buddha is called samsara, with these different types of minds, ego grasping and attachment and aversion, this map of the mind, as far as Buddha is concerned, this is the map of the mind since beginningless time. This is the map of the mind of all occupants of all the realms of all existence, period. It's a coherent worldview as far as the Buddha is concerned. So we know very well that it's only, I don't know the numbers, several million years or whatever we want to call it, since we were labeled human. But if you look at what Buddha means by a human realm, the quality of a human, the quality that characterizes a human among all that realm of existence is the ability to think differently, is the ability to understand emptiness, is the ability to have virtue, is the ability of super intelligence, which is understanding dependent arising. That's the characteristic of a human. So then to me, that is blatantly absurd to think that the monkey guy, back in this picture of all the evolution of the monkeys, clearly that can't have been a human. It cannot have been a human. It was an animal. But we can only look at the external world, can't we? We don't think of anything else. We're trying to get that missing link or whatever they call it. I don't know what the latest is about those missing links. I don't know. But all we can look at is the external world. And of course, we can see vividly humans weren't here at a certain time. And absolutely, they were not here at a certain time. So if human mind is a mind that's existed since beginningless time, or the possibility of a human mind, where were we living? Obviously, well, they talk about in the teachings, at some point, the human birth was a much more subtle rebirth. Our physical energies, because you see, in the Vajrayana system, it's very interesting. In the Vajrayana system, they talk about how the universe consists of trillions of consciousnesses, and then the matter of the universe is made of the four elements. That's always how it's been. It's just how it is. And all minds are inextricably linked to their own set of the four elements. That's it. It's just the way it is. It's just the way it is. That's what they say. So minds, the way we create karma, we impact upon our four elements, which in turn impacts upon the body we get, which in turn impacts upon the external environment. So in that sense, karmically, we are the creators of all the universes and all the bodies and all the lines and all the hell realms and everything else. Our minds create those experiences by impacting upon our four elements. We program our minds and bodies to become who we are. So the point is then, what I'm getting at is that eons ago, before this human, and I don't think eons, I mean, how many millions of years? I don't know how many millions of years before humans were first recognized on this planet. But if you want to think of a real human having virtue and having intelligence and having the ability to not have violence and not have attachment and anger, they're the qualities that identify as a human, which is why they say now humans are very degenerate rebirth. We're acting like animals. We're acting like we kill, we rape, we murder, we steal, we lie. I mean, it's like a very gross rebirth because we've got strong access to lots of delusions, which characterize the lower realms. So I don't think it was that long ago that we had humans. So where were we before? We had subtle light bodies. Our elements manifested as subtle light, which is the result of virtue and goodness and intelligence. And then at some point, I mean, before humans on this planet, this is why I'm just extrapolating here based on the Buddhist teachings, okay? Then we've got these eons ago, they talk about the human body was much more subtle, would last 1,000 years or more. We didn't have gross elements. We didn't have gross bodies. We didn't have gross attachment and anger and all the neuroses. They were there, but they were latent. What predominated was virtue and intelligence. So it was easy to get enlightened with a subtle light body. This is not meant to be mysterious. We all got elements, and elements manifest in different ways, the 4 elements, based on the mind. So slowly that began to generate, and slowly attachment began to grow, and the other delusions began to grow, and that impacted upon the wind energies, and that eventually created the cause for us to have this body with 5 holes that demand feeding. Well, what caused this? Attachment. We'll get into this when we get into the second scope of practice. We look at the samsara and what characterizes it and how we created it with attachment. We have made penises and vaginas and mouths and ears and eyes and the external world, which are the objects of these 5 centers that we have to stuff in. This is the grossness of this human realm that we have at the moment. It's the product of attachment. Luckily, we've still got access to some virtue. So that's food for thought for you, okay? That's me extrapolating based on Buddha's teachings, understanding how we're all made of the mind with the elements and what a human is and what animals are, etc., etc. So if you have any questions, please ask, or any arguments with me, or tell me I'm stupid, whatever you like. Any other questions?
Venerable, there are quite a lot of questions, so I'll just read the next one out. Relating to the question was, is the extinction of many species and the increase of human population the result of group karma, like animals, insects, birds, and getting rebirth?
I mean, all the trillions of beings who live on this planet. This is why at the moment the human realm is so degenerate, because we're living on a planet, sharing it with animals and looking like animals. That's not trying to be rude about animals, but it's pointing to the grossness of the human realm right now, that we actually look like animals sharing a planet with animals. Not being rude about animals, it's a lower rebirth. So this human realm is very gross. So of course it's collective karma. Everything we do impacts upon each other. So creatures being destroyed, of course, humans with our clever, intelligent minds we're not the main harmers, but we're pretty good at harming. We're pretty good at destroying the universe because we're intelligent. That's the terrible irony. Intelligence is a character of being a human, but when it's driven by attachment and anger, we misuse it and we use it to harm others. This is what's so shocking. This is what's so terrible. Of course, it's collective karma. Yeah. We'll discuss that later. Any more questions?
Yes. And Ariane has a question, and she will ask
Good,
herself.
darling. Talk to me. Yes.
Venerable.
Yes, we can.
It's kind of an odd question, I guess, because I love that you were once a Catholic, because I'd always wanted to be a Catholic nun, but I was raised Unitarian. I was raised a Unitarian all my life, but I have a lot of Christian friends, and they ask me all the time who I think created a flower if it wasn't God, who created the seed that became the flower or the tree if I didn't believe in a creator. And I don't know how to answer them, but like the 4 elements, I get that, but who created the 4 elements? Does it, you see, and maybe it's not a question that needs an answer.
Now you've hit the nail on the head. Your real question is, where did it all begin? Where did it all begin? That's your question. That's your real question, isn't it? You just said who created the 4 elements.
Yes,
so yes. Precise. That's the whole Buddhist point, honey. And that's why in the very first level of his teachings we will be giving, you've got to look at the concept of beginningless mind. This is what the Buddhist view is. So think, okay, let's do this. Because the one of the strongest questions we all have, whether we're materialist, whether we're Christian or Muslim, whatever view we have, we all tend to ask, where did it begin? Where's the first moment? We're all looking for the first moment. We're all looking for the first big bang. We're all looking, even at when we go to our therapist, we're all looking for, when did my anger begin? When did my depression begin? When did this bad habit begin? We all desperately, desperately want a first moment. Now, do we all agree with that? You agree with that, Ariane? Already, Ariane, the Buddha's view, the Buddha's analysis of cause and effect, and the Buddhist analysis of the ultimate way that things exist, which is emptiness and dependent arising, right there, he says it is a mistaken question in the first place. That it is a bizarre idea to assume that there can be a first cause. Now, I've heard among my Christian friends, and they even capitalize F and C, first cause. It's a big discussion among Christians, how, and they try to show how there can be a first cause. Buddha says, and Buddha doesn't say it like this, he's very polite, a load of rubbish. Because if we first posit that everything in the universe is dynamic, everything is a product of dependent arising, everything we can see in the universe, including the mind and all matter, live according to the law of cause and effect. We can see this. It's a dynamic process of impermanence. It's a dynamic process of this thing giving rise to that thing, which gives rise to this thing, which gives rise to that thing. I mean, we can get that. So if you follow this logic through, it is absolutely a bizarre idea to think that you can posit something that itself didn't have a cause. That's an impossibility. Conclusion, matter and minds are necessarily beginningless. I know it's a demented concept for us. We can get our head around the idea of God being the first cause because we're happy with the idea of God not having a cause. We don't analyze it, we just believe it. And then we can think, oh, everything came from God, which is why that question, which is why the Muslims would say everything is so amazing, there has to be a creator. We run to that concept. Now, Buddha philosophically is arguing with that very philosophical position that we make up. He would assert that we have made up the idea of the concept of a creator. Don't misunderstand me here. Buddha talks about superior beings. Buddha says all of us can become superior beings, but the concept of a creator, that is made up by us, Buddha says. This is a misconception. I'm not trying to be rude to anybody if you've got faith in a creator. And you've got, this is all the stuff, this is where he diverged from the Hindus. That there's an intrinsic Atman, there's an intrinsic source there. He disagrees with that philosophically, and it's a subtle, subtle concept. And that's the one we have to meditate on to see the truth of that, not just to blindly believe it. That necessarily you can't have a first cause, necessarily. That's the Buddha's view. So that's a hard one to listen to. And a person who's got a lot of faith in a Christian, that might be a very shocking view. So you don't necessarily tell them that. Because it could sound like a wrong view. They'll be very shocked. So, you know, it's very fascinating.
Yeah.
Are we communicating?
Yeah. So actually, it made me think of a second part of the question. For some reason, it's easier to. I don't believe in God, but because I am a practicing Buddhist.
Ariane,
but
just for the sake of argument, I don't want you to believe in anything. You don't posit the possibility of a creator is a better system, better way to put it. I always say it's my working hypothesis.
Working hypothesis.
Intellectual lazy.
Okay.
I'm not trying to be fancy, but it's a much better way to put it. You know.
Okay. Yeah. Actually, I like that better. It is easier to understand about the beginningless and endlessness of the mind and the continuity of that. For some reason, with the sentient beings, for some reason, when you look at something that's just elements, a flower or tree, they don't have a mind.
I know, but we have
so they're like matter. So you think of it in terms of matter.
We'll go into that when we describe karma.
Oh, okay. Awesome.
Good. Okay,
Thank you. Thank you.
Good. What else, people? Any other questions?
Yes. There are two more questions, but I think they're related, so I will just read it out as one.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Okay, so what level of realization prevents the mind to follow back in hell or animal realm?
Good,
and
yes,
the second question is, what is the origin of attachment and where does it come from? So
the second question is Ariane's question. There is no first moment of attachment. So the better way to, the second part, the better way to answer this idea, we want some big kind of lump of first cause somewhere way back then. When did attachment begin? When did karma begin? When did suffering begin? There's no, in that kind of lump of a beginning. Not like that. It's a more organic process. The question to ask is this: where did this moment in my mind of attachment come from? Well, it can only come from the very millisecond of attachment before that. And where did that millisecond of attachment come from? Its main source in this chain of moments of attachment is the previous link in the chain of attachment. And where did that moment of attachment come from? The previous attachment. And where did that attachment come from? And you go and you track it back to your first second of conception in your mummy's womb. Well, where did the tendency for attachment come from? In that womb, in that consciousness, which came from a previous life where I practiced attachment. And where did that attachment come from? The previous moment of attachment. And you'll keep going back to beginningless time. You'll never come up with the first moment, which is instinctively what we're looking for. Attachment is also beginningless. But luckily, attachment can be ended. So what's the logic of that? We often think, well, if attachment and anger and suffering is beginningless, it's got to be endless. No, it's a chicken and egg. You can have an egg right now. You know it came from a chicken. But honey, you can break that egg any damn time you like and you'll never get another chicken. So that's Buddha's whole entire point about how we can get out of samsara. So the answer to the other question, you'll only finally stop being reborn in any realm when you've realized emptiness. So the very first level of practice, so other stages of practice, we're like in junior school and we're discussing the gross level of suffering, the first kind of suffering, which is the lower realms. So we can stop the lower realms by not killing, not stealing, not lying, not harming. Karma takes care. As long as you keep not killing and keep not lying and you purify past tendencies to kill and lie, and that's the purification practice, which we'll talk about with karma, and it looks like it will be maybe next week, then you can guarantee you will never go to the lower realms. But to absolutely be certain that you can never fall down, but also not even take a human realm, even an upper realm, is when you realize emptiness. That's when you finally cut the root, and we'll get to that eventually. So that's my answers. Any more questions?
Not in the chat. I think we have asked all the questions in the chat. Anyone else?
Okay, that's fine. Oh,
yes, I have a question.
Who is this? Let's have a look. Who is it?
This is Cyril.
Cyril, hi, darling. Talk to me, Cyril.
Hi. Yes, I was reading the other day this book, and they were talking about this very famous American botanist, and he was very, very famous, and he created all these different types of plants. And one of the plants that he created was a cactus without any thorns.
Okay, good. So then, question.
And the way he created was by basically speaking and talking to this cactus and telling them you don't need to grow any thorns. You're safe.
Really? That's interesting, isn't it? How interesting.
Very. So how can plants not be sentient beings if they can listen and respond?
That's interesting. But I mean, he can prove that he did this, can't he?
Yeah, he can. He's very famous. I mean, there's even a word in English language now. There's words following his last name. I forget. Doesn't come to my mind now.
I can't possibly answer that question. I don't know, Cyril.
But that means that plants also have
it doesn't
mind.
follow logically. No, it doesn't follow logically, but it could be a deduction you could make, yeah. So then the only time to prove that, Cyril, is when you've got clairvoyance, when you've got single-pointed concentration, you've got shamatha, you will have clairvoyance, and then you'll be able to see with certainty. But I want to just add a point here that, there are trillions of, it's just my own thought. I'm not giving this as a definitive answer, so please do not take it as that. It's just my thinking that the world, the physical world that we live in, there are billions of other creatures, billions of spirits all living around in the cactuses, in the light bulbs, in the trees, in the ground, in the roses. There are billions of beings everywhere. And because these cactuses and these roses and these trees are their home. So I wouldn't be surprised if maybe clever spirits around and they can sort of, I don't know. I can't even imagine. But I understand your point. But in the end, all we can do is wait till we try and see the logic of it to understand if there are other possibilities. Ask one of the lamas how this could be, but they often just will say, I don't know, because they'll go by the teachings. But the only way we can prove that this is not true, that they haven't got consciousness, is when we're clairvoyant. Then you will see definitely, because clairvoyant mind, which is a subtler mind, can see other minds. That's all I can say, Cyril. It's an interesting point. I agree with you.
Thank you very much.
Totally fascinating. Any other points, people? We'll carry on.
Yes, Venerable Batsu also has another question.
Good, Bashu.
Thank you, Robina. I have a very simple question. As the whole group or your followers, actually, we are not exactly following what Buddha laid down the rules like Buddha's Dharma and Sangha.
Aren't we? What do you mean are not? What do you mean by that? So explain.
What I mean exactly is that we can take the Buddha mind or the concept, but we cannot go around begging as in Buddhism it's done. So the best thing that you said in the very beginning was that Buddhism, don't take Buddhism as a religion, but as the mind of the Buddha, the Buddha mind. And we can achieve that mind, even I think by following the rules and even doing what we are doing right now.
But I think, okay, I don't understand your point totally. So why don't you put it into a question? I can roughly hear your implication, but I want to be clear. So why don't you put it into a question? Then I can see clearly what you're meaning. So ask me a question, Bashu.
So if I don't live a life of a monk, can I get an
okay, thank you. Now we're getting somewhere. Now we're getting somewhere. Thank you. Basu, there are three, this is the point about this packaging of the teachings that you're listening to now, called in Tibetan the Lam Rim. It's the different levels of Buddha's teachings. So the very first level of Buddha's teachings, which is the first turning of the wheel, is exactly as you say. That's what is known in the world as the Hinayana teachings, the Theravadan teachings. If you go to Burma and Thailand, you will learn exactly this, which is the level of looking like the Buddha. It's the level of renunciation. You abide by the laws of karma. You give up harming sentient beings. The best scenario is to take refuge, then give up sex, drugs, and rock and roll, become a monk or a nun, and walk around looking like one of his monks and begging, etc., etc. That's the personification of the entire first stages of practice. And by practicing all this, you would then achieve your nirvana, your cessation of suffering and its causes. So taking this package we're describing here, which is in the Mahayana tradition, that's junior school and high school. And if you'd graduated high school, that's when you'd live your life like that. You'd live in vows. If you're a lay person even, you'd live in vows. You'd have a very humble life. There's not much wriggle room. You live in your vows. You don't harm, you don't kill, you don't steal. And then eventually you get renunciation, and eventually you realize emptiness, and you get out of samsara. Goodbye, you're finished. That's the first and second scopes, or junior school and high school, of this bigger packaging we're describing here. And that's the Hinayana level. You're absolutely correct. But we've also got here the compassion wing, which is the Mahayana component, which is the second turning of the wheel of the Buddha, which were given in a more subtle form of the Buddha. And this is all the teachings about the perfection, getting bodhicitta and the compassion and the perfection of Buddha, perfection of the six perfections of the bodhisattva, who is a person who doesn't, even once they've finished, maybe they've even realized emptiness, the bodhisattva will keep coming back life after life until eventually they're a Buddha, and then they can manifest in countless bodies throughout universes to be of benefit to sentient beings. So we're discussing everything in the framework of the Mahayana path here. And we are discussing the first stages. We are discussing the Hinayana teachings, because that's junior school and high school. But the Mahayana path asserts also the compassion wing, the accomplishment of bodhicitta, and the capacity to become a Buddha, which is far more powerful and more potent than becoming a Hinayana Arhat. That's the framework here. Are we communicating? Good, good, good. Go on, people. Other questions?
There's no more questions in the chat.
Good, fine. So if there's any more, you put your hand up. So where were we? We were in refuge. So I just started briefly. So typically when you take refuge, when you formalize your refuge, having checked on the teachings, having done some practice, having thought about it, and then deciding, you would then ask a person, your teacher or person whom you see as a teacher, you should check and you should request to take refuge formally in front of somebody. You could do that, At the same time, you might often also take the 5 laypersons' vows, which really we only discuss when we talk about karma. So we'll discuss that when we get to karma, and we'll talk about that then. So I think that's enough for refuge. That'll do for now for refuge. So now, first of all, here we are. We've looked at our beginningless mind. We're thinking, my goodness, this mind has got this marvelous potential to become a Buddha. So then the next step is, whom can I turn to? I need a teacher right at the beginning. I need a teacher, a person right now who can show me the way. Then we think about the qualities of a teacher, how to find a guru. Then the next step is when we think about the preciousness of this human life. I don't want to waste it. So the action point is I must not waste it. What can I do now? So then I enter into the path, and I get to junior school, the first one. And now a teacher or tsongkhapa increases my wish not to waste this precious life. And then I start to think about impermanence and death. So then I'm galvanized into action. Oh my God, I could die at any moment. I definitely don't want to waste this precious life. Then it leads me to the next point. Then I start to think about the likely possibilities of suffering rebirths, like we talked this morning. And that increases my wake-up call. Oh my God, I definitely do not want to waste this life. So now whom can I turn to prevent that kind of suffering? So then I turn to the Buddha and the Dharma and the Sangha. I rely upon them. And now we get to practice. Now, this is all priming our minds step by step by step. Now we start to put our money where our mouth is, and we now start to practice. We now start to apply Buddha's methods. We now start to apply Buddha's medicine to stop us from having this future suffering. And this is where we start to learn about karma. This is where we begin to practice. We begin to practice now. So now we have to understand the law of karma. Okay, this is the next step. So what does all this mean? But I need a 2-minute break. Okay, my voice is really bad and I'm so sorry. Just 2 minutes. So relax for 2 minutes, close your eyes, lie down, do what you like, have a breather, whatever you want for 2 minutes, or I'll be back in 2 minutes. Thank you, sweethearts. Very kind.
Does anyone want to chant Green Tara while we wait? Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay, I'm just gonna try to chant, and then you may be so out of tune. Om da de, do de so ha. Om da de, do de so ha. Tara's probably better. Can you unmute yourself? Om da de, do de so ha. 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 Om da de, do de so hum. 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 Om da de, do de so hum.
Hello. Very nice, Dahlia. Well done.
We're just chatting.
Good. Okay. Let's carry on. Let's continue then. Are we all here? Yes. Okay. So listen, everybody. Let's now, given all those things we just said, we're now ready to put our money where our mouth is. This is where we begin to actually practice. This is the whole point, to understand. All those points before are all Buddhist theories, they're all Buddhist philosophy, because we've got to think about them. But the agenda, Atisha and Tsongkhapa's agenda in listening to these and thinking about them is to energize us to finally now get to the point where we abide by the law of karma. If you like, this is the beginning of practice. I mean, as Lama Zopa says, you know, if you want to start practicing Buddhism this second, well, the thing to do this second, as he says, is to stop killing, stop stealing, stop lying, stop bad-mouthing, etc., etc., etc. So this is the beginning of practice. So, but all the previous stuff, which can take, you know, ages in the books if you're reading them, You don't know why you're hearing all this, but this is to prime our mind. This is to get us ready to want to practice, to be energized, to want to live a life of good ethics. You know, if you go backwards, well, why should I want to practice good ethics? Well, I've just thought about how I could be born in the lower realms. And what caused, no, I've just thought about the Buddha, relying upon the Buddha. Well, why should I rely upon the Buddha? You go to the next point previous, because I could be born in the lower realms. What do you mean born in the lower realms? And the point before that is, well, you know, death is definite. I could die at any moment, and that's a type of rebirth. But what about before that? Who cares about death? Well, before that, I've thought about the preciousness of this human life, and I don't want to waste it. So you go backwards and you see the logic of it. So now you begin to practice. Now we start to put our money where his mouth is. This is just to energize us to want to practice, to want to live a life of ethics. Because on the face of it, why should we? You know, there's nothing to compel us to do that. This is the logic to think about that would compel us to think I must stop harming others, which is the beginning of good ethics. So, okay. So now we learn about the law of karma, because this is the first level of practice. And as I said, as Lama Zopa says, first instant practice right now, this second, stop the 7 little things. Buddha exhorts us to stop doing 7 little baby things. 3 of the body, 4 of the speech, and 3 of the mind. He would exhort us to stop killing, stop taking the ungiven, stop jumping on the wrong partner, or stop, you know. So in other words, stop using your body to harm others, which are actions that are based upon attachment and anger, for example. Then the next 4 are us humans. Stop lying, stop saying words that aren't true, stop rabbiting on about nothing, just blur out the mouth with no thought of whether the person in front of you wants to listen, just rubbish, meaningless talk. No abusive language, and then no bad mouthing behind backs. And what are these actions? They're actions of the speech that are driven by attachment and aversion. Guess what, you know? And then the last 3, I like to put it this way, are just the beginnings of Buddha getting us to start to harness the crazy mind. So later on, we'll learn about the mind, but here, you know, it implies this. There are these 3 main delusions, the 3 root delusions, which are what drive our actions of body and speech, attachment and aversion mostly, but also the root one called ignorance. So here he gets us to harness the most berserk levels of ignorance, which is wrong view, fundamentalism, all the way we see the world so rampant now with all these conspiracy theories and fundamentalism and racism and all. I mean, you can see it vividly. This is what Buddha means by this really gross level of the root delusion called ignorance, wrong view, really believing that it doesn't matter what you do if you don't get caught, really believing that, you know, pedophiles run the universe. I mean, this is like the maddest, you know, isn't it? I mean, these views that are around these days, that's called wrong view, narrow-minded, very ignorant, or even in our daily lives, we can see it. I'm right, you're wrong. That's this fundamentalism ignorance, you know. So at least calm that down. Then calm down the grosser levels of anger, which are like this heavy-duty level of not bad enough being angry, but then when you can't give it up and you even want the other person to suffer. Look at the world. Ill will, malice. We can see it. It's a heavy level of anger. At least harness that. And then at least try to harness and calm down the grossest levels of attachment, which is this constant craving. I mean, you can see so many humans, animals, have unbelievable suffering of attachment, like becoming a junkie, becoming an alcoholic, eating food till you're 500 kilos. You know, it's not criticizing anybody. It's the suffering of the mind. Jumping on 14 boys a day, constantly craving. I mean, the pain of these states of mind are unbearable. We don't notice because we just think it's normal. So at least harnessing these 3 grosser levels of the 3 main delusions. These are the 10 non-virtues. This is Buddha's first little bit of advice. If you ask Buddha's advice, what's the medicine, Buddha? You go to the doctor, Buddha, but Buddha, what will I do? This is the first piece of advice he'll give you. And you should ask him, well, what's this got to do with me? What do you mean I should stop killing all these mean people out there? What do you mean I should stop stealing? I'm poor. He will explain to you his view, and his view is this, that every millisecond, whatever we think, he'll tell me, Robina, honey, why I want you to not kill. I'm suggesting it because you've asked me, you've turned to me, you've asked me, and I'm giving you some medicine, and the medicine is stop killing other people. So I'll tell you why, honey. Not because I said so. That's Jesus's reason. Jesus's reason for telling me not to kill is because God said. This is crystal clear, and that's not a bad reason, but it's not Buddha's reason. Jesus's reason for not jumping on the wrong partner is because God said. because God's the boss. And that's what a sin is by definition. I always quote this. My Jesuit priest friend said, when I asked him what defines something as a sin, this is a really crucial point. He said it's doing what God said not to do. This is the meaning of it. But I think we feel that already. We think that view. We think a naughty action is doing what mummy said you shouldn't do. We think a naughty action is doing what the police said you shouldn't do, which is why we get nervous and neurotic and don't want to get caught, which is why when we do the action but don't get caught, we think, aha, I got away with it. Well, for the Buddha, that's completely infantile. That's completely childish. That's like beyond belief. That's like thinking that because you don't smoke cigarettes, you won't get because nobody sees you, because your doctor doesn't see you smoke cigarettes, you won't get cancer. What a joke. But that's not, so this is not the Buddha's view of why he says don't kill, don't steal. His reason is because Robina petal, sweetie pie, honey, what I found is every sentient being is driven by the law of karma. The law of karma is such that everything you think and do and say, Robina, will leave imprints in your mind and will ripen in 4 different ways as your future experiences. Your negative actions will ripen as experiences similar to that and other things, and your positive actions in the same way. So, Robina, do you want to get killed in the future? Do you want to be sick? Do you want to live in lousy environments? Do you want to be harmed by others? Do you want to be born in the lower realms? No, thank you, Buddha. Well, here's my advice. There's my medicine. It's very clear. You go to the homeopathic section in the Whole Foods stores. They're very organized. They've got all the diseases listed from A to Z, and they have the medicine next to it. Oh, arthritis, arnica. Thank you very much. Buy my arnica. That's it. This is Buddha's medicine. The logic of karma is simple, but we hear it as punitive. We hear it as God saying, if you kill Robina, I'll send you to hell. That's how we hear it. There is no view like that in Buddhism. Buddha's not a punisher. There is no creator. There is no punisher. There is no rewarder. There is no punitive, you do this and I'll punish you. We've made that view up, Buddha says. So it's pretty intense. He says we create ourselves. It's the essence of what he's saying with the law of karma. We create ourselves. So that when you hear all the teachings, they don't tell you it like this. They just say, don't do this and don't do that. They give, and as you learn, as you do this, you get to learn, you extrapolate. So the law of karma for the Buddha is a natural law. He is not a creator. He did not come up with it. He did not invent it. In the same way that botany wasn't invented by a clever botanist. A botanist is a person who uses their intelligence and observes gardens and then sees what the laws are and articulates those laws and then codifies them. That's Buddha. That's what natural law means. That's the Buddha's view. So why he tells me the very first level, don't kill, don't die, don't steal, is because, Robina, darling girl, you don't want suffering, and this is for your sake. And like I'm saying all the time, this is the hardest one for us to hear in our culture, because we think, oh, that sounds selfish. It's so bizarre to think that. You've got to first want not, when you go to the doctor and you don't know why your lungs are hurting, and she tells you, well, darling, because it's just smoke and you should stop smoking. You don't say, oh, I must give up smoking so I can help all sentient beings. Of course, that's your underlying reason, but you've got to be revolted by smoking. You've got to be revolted by the cancer that could come. You've got to be energized not to want cancer. This is the same here. You've got to be revolted by the thought of being born in the lower realms. You've got to be revolted by the thought of getting killed, lied to, stolen from, bad-mouthed. They, we know with certainty we don't like. Well, then Buddha says these are the causes of it, precious girl. Your past actions of the negativity in the past are why you suffer now. So you don't want future suffering? Well, stop smoking cigarettes. That's the analogy. Stop creating the causes of the future suffering, Robina. That's the essence of karma. But it takes us so long to hear it like this, you know. So we better learn. So this law, this natural law that runs the universe, like botany runs gardens. If you want a garden, it's not much use in believing in botany, is it? You'd be stupid. It's not going to help you. I'm happy you believe in it, but you've got to know it. Same here. So just don't believe in karma, believe in reincarnation. That's infantile. It's intellectual laziness. If you want to take this view as your working hypothesis, which is what I say, for me, then I better learn this damn law. I better know what actions to stop doing, at least first, what actions to stop doing, so I can stop my own suffering. It's like self-respect. It's incredible self-respect. It's incredible self-respect. Buddha's saying the things we do now are exactly what harm me. That's the irony. When I lie, I steal, I kill. Okay, have compassion for ourselves because we came into this damn life with these tendencies, driven by our own suffering. So we should have such compassion for ourselves. They don't say it like that, but that's the meaning, you know, like you would if you stopped smoking. And it's going to be hard giving up old habits. We know that. But that's why you've got to understand the logic of why you should stop smoking, why you should stop eating sugar, why you should stop killing, why you should stop stealing. And this is just the first level, 10 little tiny things. The heaviest ones, the first 7 are the heaviest because they involve others. They're not the only negative actions. Any action that's, we're going to go into the details now, but any action that's driven by a delusion will sow a negative karmic seed in your little bank vault that will ripen as one kind of suffering or another for you in the future. The 7 are the heaviest ones because they relate to others, you know. We can see we're very social beings. So we're going to meet others again. And who are the others we will meet? The others that we meet in the future will be those who harmed us and those who have helped us. Buddha says karma is a natural law. It runs the universe. The universe runs within this law, put it that way. It's not a big stick that's used to beat you. It's not punishment, it's not reward. These are the heavy duty views we have made up. It's very ironic. So what are the laws? What are some of those, you know, the substance of this law? Well, the big picture is, as usual, always the big picture. There are trillions upon countless trillions of sentient beings. Mind possessor, that's the term in Tibetan. I think it's much nicer. Sem Chen, mind haver. I love that phrase. All the mind possessors. It's a lovely term, mind possessor. Remember, mind is not physical. Mind is used synonymously with the word consciousness. Mind is not the equivalent of a soul. Mind is your own consciousness. At the grosser level, intellectual, conceptual, emotional, unconscious, subconscious, instinct, intuition. It's this entire spectrum of your inner being, all labeled mind, from the grossest to the most subtle, from the most negative to the most positive, to the most impure to the most pure. All of it is known as your mind or your consciousness. And this river of mental moments of yours is not the handiwork of a creator, is not the handiwork of mummy and daddy, is not a function of the physical. It's beginningless and endless. And every millisecond of what goes on in that mind plays out in this law of karma. So the law of karma, the details of the law of karma, everything, I mean, everything's cause and effect. We know that. Lamps and computers, we're clever, we're brilliant, we're scientists. We know that stuff, we're good at it. Buddha's expertise isn't lamps and computers. Buddha's expertise is minds. And Buddha's expertise within that, the simple next detail of the actions we do, karma means action. Every millisecond we think and then do and say is an action that leaves an imprint in the mind, that programs the mind, that leaves a seed in the mind. And so the next level of detail is every action that's labeled negative will ripen in the future as one's suffering. Every action that's labeled positive will ripen in the future of one's happiness. And there are clearly variations of these, obvious. So there are 4 ways in which our past actions ripen in the present, and therefore 4 ways in which our present actions will ripen in the future. And it's logical that if you sow the seed, the fruit will come. And it's logical that if in this life you see the fruit, this is the hardest one, then you must have sown the seed. You must have sown the seed. So there are 4 ways we can express these experiences we have. Let's look in the present. One is a type of rebirth you get, like we indicated earlier. So we can deduce at the time of our past death, which we discussed last week, about the time before we stop breathing, one of our billions of karmic seeds in our many different bank vaults, and obviously that's just my analogy, but it's a useful one, a main karmic seed of non-killing, which I'll go into now, a main karmic seed of non-killing was triggered at the time we stopped breathing from an action of our own non-killing. That was triggered, which then programmed us right then to come to eventually go to our present mother's fallopian tube when she was in bed with our daddy, basically speaking. We programmed that life. We programmed that. We caused that. That's the result. Our getting our human mother and this particular human body with this particular human characteristics was the fruit of our past non-killing, a fully ripened result of non-killing. We'll go into those details. So we already created the cause. And I always quote this. I've forgotten it lately, but somebody reminded me, and it's hilarious. In this wonderful book, Wisdom published years ago, called The Tibetan Art of Parenting. It's a baby book, basically. It's about how Tibetan mummies prepare to get pregnant, you know. So this Lama was quoted as saying, at the time of a male and female human beings having sex, billions of consciousnesses that have recently passed away are all hovering around trying to get in. I mean, that is pretty intense. Would you not agree? And we got in. We won the lottery. It's not the lottery. We created the cause. But it shows how hard it is to get a decent human body. Billions of consciousnesses who've recently passed away, driven, and we're going to discuss this later, driven by attachment. Attachment energy is what drives us. Attachment energy is what drives this entire planet, this samsara, this realm of desire. And attachment is what drives us to another rebirth, you know, based upon karma. So billions of consciousnesses were trying to get into our mummy and daddy's egg and sperm, and we got in. I find that pretty delicious. That's the fruit of past non-killing. We created the cause. They are merely lying there having sex, hopefully having fun as well. And we come barging in. So don't blame your mother and father. That's the first hilarious point in Buddhism. They're just, you know, you got some history with them. That's the point. You've got history. These three of you guys have got history. That's the point. So second way your karma ripens, look into your human body now, and there's the same human body as Hitler, roughly speaking, and the same human body as, you know, Mr. Stalin or the local pedophile. Please check on my point. The same body, a couple of eyes, couple of legs, couple of ears, a brain, you know, nose. Check it out. Some are more pretty than others, I agree. What's the difference? Is your mind, honey. Is your tendencies, your capacity for love or hate or jealousy or pedophile or killing or torture or whatever it might be that you're in your life you express. Math or music or football. This is called, the first one's called the fully ripened result, the type of body you get. Now, in our case, we've also, like the animals, as Basu talked, we've got billions of karmic seeds in our bank vaults for suffering rebirths as well. We've also got karmic seeds in there for a lion rebirth from past killing karma. But fortunately for us, like a miracle, because we died well, and let's say hopefully we practiced some virtue in the past life and we nourished those seeds, at the time of our death, we must have been fairly peaceful at the time of death. This is why helping at death is so important. One of our virtuous karmic seed was nourished and was triggered. So it could easily have been a lion karmic seed. So in which case, when you die, that is triggered. You're programmed to go to the lion mummy's womb when she hops into bed with her boyfriend. But we didn't get one of those, luckily. That's due to killing habit. Then that you get the human body or the lion body. Now, in our case, us, human body, wow, already fantastic. Now let's look at our tendencies. The second kind of karma is called the intentions or the tendencies similar to the cause. So it's pretty obvious, a bunch of habits, basically. We get born with a bunch of habits. Your habits and your mind, this is where it's so utterly different from the neuroscientific view. We really believe in our modern culture, our modern views, that we get being good at piano from mummy, being a pedophile from daddy or whatever. And then we go from daddy to mummy to the grandma, the grandpa, the great-grandma, back to the monkeys. That's the only way we can track it, right? That's why we're so puzzled so many times, half the time, especially in extreme examples. I remember those Columbine kids, I remember that vividly, 30 years ago, whatever it was. And even they pulled up the brains. They dug up the brains of these two boys, because when they looked at the parents, all they found was two nice white Christian parents. Nobody could find any evidence in any behavior of anything ever since they were born of how come these two wacko boys turned out to be kind of multi-murderers with fascist ideas and bizarre, conspiracy theories. They looked in the brain, because where else can we look? We don't have anywhere else to look but the brain, isn't it? Because that's our view. We don't posit reincarnation. We don't posit a consciousness that brings its own stuff with it. This is Buddha's view. Equally, look at all, I mean, I love looking on YouTube with these brilliant little children who play the piano, play the violin. Unbelievable. The summer just utterly captivate me. One, this little blonde Russian boy. He's now about 10. He's been doing it since he's 3. He's got his own channel. You can't believe the brilliance of this music. You can't believe what you're seeing. It's like someone photoshopped YouTube. Now, where the hell do you think he got this music from? I mean, the only thing that explains it is a hypothesis. He brought it with him. Same with Hitler. Same with Mother Teresa. We're mystified. We don't understand it. We're looking. Well, it's fine in our culture. Neuroscience are still looking for the answers. I'm happy for us. But all I'm doing is telling you is Buddha's answers, coming from the Indians before that, which are a good 3,000 years old, these answers, you know. So this is just a view in the world. It's up to us if we want to listen to it. No one's forcing us to believe it. We bring our own tendencies with it, babies. We bring our own tendencies with us. From the first second conception, and these are even triggered before we died. Second bank vault, your tendencies. 3 minutes to go, but I'll finish. The third bank vault, the seeds are triggered, is called your experiences, similar to the cause, which are the cause of all the people you meet, how they treat you and how they see you. Look at your life. From the second you were born up to now, we are very social beings, are we not? We've bumped into sentient beings. Our mummy and daddy gave us a body. I've got siblings and aunties and uncles and grandpas and rats and cockroaches in the kitchen and next door neighbors and the people on the bus and the kids at school and everybody up to now. And if you categorize all the beings who've had contact with us in this life, they are divided into people who are nice to us and people who are mean to us. And they often change roles. We can see that. Well, that's called experiences similar to the cause. There's more to it than that. But we're very social. We bump into people we bumped into before. If this is a natural law, there's nothing random in our life, which is the biggest shock on the planet because we think it's all random. We think nobody knows why. It's all just hit and miss. Nobody knows why you win the lottery. Nobody knows why you lose money. Nobody knows anything. It's all due to past actions. If you get $1 and you're on the street begging, it's because of some merit of generosity in the past. You know? If you can't even get $1, even though you're a nice person, even though you're generous, because you haven't got this third karma of past generosity, and you've got past stealing karma, so you can't get a job, you can't even get $1, you can't even get a grain of rice. Look at the world. This is due to, all these actions, they bring all their own results, and I'll go into this next week. And the fourth way our karma ripens is called environmental. And this gets to Ariane's point about how there can be flowers and things like this. And we'll get to that next week as well. That's even the way the physical world impacts upon us. So very simply, think of your life. You live in an environment. You don't float in the sky, do you? And your physical world impacts upon you, doesn't it? Even the house you live in, whether it's smelly or clean or nice or moldy or a lovely view, none of it's accidental. It's due to your past virtue or non-virtue. The physical world, the food, the water, the air, how it impacts upon you. The way sentient beings impact upon you, how you're treated, nice or ugly, believed or not believed. Your own mind itself, your tendencies, and even your own physical human body. Who is the creator of all of this? Well, honey children, you are. It's a pretty cosmic view. They don't say it like this when you read the traditional Lam Rim. But this is extrapolating. But I find this is a very tasty way to talk about it. All right, that'll do for today. Thank you, precious people. No questions. Next week, questions, all right?
Yes, we have one more question, but I'll leave it to next week.
Do that, please. And all I am doing here is presenting Buddha's teachings in my language, in Australian accent, coming from the lineage of my Tibetan holy being teachers, Dalai Lama and his mob, who are coming from the great Nalanda monastery tradition, this brilliant monastery, monastic university system back in India, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th century, tracking back in an unbroken lineage of holy beings right back to then, tracking back in an unbroken lineage right back to Lord Buddha. This is the teachings you're getting out of here. So if you don't want to believe me, don't believe me, check up on the teachings, read the valid sources, read the Dalai Lama, read the proper Tibetans, and you'll see that I'm saying it in an Australian accent, an Australian way, but every word I'm telling you is valid Buddhist teachings. And if it's not, you kindly point it out to me, please. All right? People, sweetie pies.
Thank you, Robina.
What day do you have your discussion groups or whatever you have? Tell me.
Okay, we on the discussion groups, we have it on Tuesday, the same time, 7 to 9.
What do you do in that group?
Yes, we do, 7 to 8:30. And it's led by Nina and Jeff.
But darling, what do you do in that group?
Oh, okay, I will let Nina and Jeff speak about it because they lead the.
All right. What do you do, darlings?
Yes, so we start with a guided Lamrim meditation, and we choose a topic that was discussed in the teachings. And then we have a short break and have a discussion group, also moderated, guided.
Discussion group. How long is the group? How long is the group?
How long?
Yeah.
1.5 hours together.
And so who leads it?
Jeff leads the meditation, and one of us leads
So the next group you have on Tuesday will be on this topic we're discussing today, or an earlier topic?
The meditation will be on the dying process, because we haven't gotten to do
that
yet.
Okay, we'll go through the 8 stages. So Jeff will go through the 8 stages.
Right, and the discussion questions will be based on tonight's topics.
Oh, I see. Okay. So let me just tell you something. I studied philosophy with my philosophy teacher, Geshe Tektok, who was the abbot at Sarah J Monastery, which is Lama Zopa Lam Yeshe's monastery, for the 7 years, and he's passed away now. And then he was also the abbot at our monastery at Enlightenment monastery in France. And he was my philosophy teacher when I first became a nun. I became a nun in 1978. Then I studied intensive a couple of years philosophy, some of the fundamental texts that are the basis of everything in the Lam Rim, right? And all I know is this. All I know is those 2 years, we studied 5 days a week, and we had discussion at the end of every day. And that's based upon the monasteries where they have the classes, and then where you do all the work. In the monasteries, you listen to the class, and then you go to the debate yard. I have this amazingly sophisticated system of debate, which we haven't replicated in the West yet. But it's brilliant, using logic and analysis to rip to pieces the things you've just heard in your philosophy class, to get to see the logic of it, get to see the understanding of it. So this is, for me, this is when we did 5 days of class, then we'd have another 90 minutes straight away, we'd have so-called debate, and often one-on-one. So I would recommend, how do you, so you do this class always as a group, then people ask questions, and then somebody answers. Is that correct?
Yes, we have a moderated discussion, I would say. So we have some questions that we base the discussion on, but then it's more of a discussion.
And how you do the discussion? How do you do it?
We usually start with a question, for example.
No, I know, but wait a minute. I'm so sorry. Listen, Nina, if there's 4 people there, do you have all 4 people discussing one point, or do you have them break up into pairs?
We break it out to smaller groups. So maybe
but how big are the smaller groups?
About groups of 4.
No, okay, useless. I mean, not useless. I'm rude as usual. May I suggest a new way of doing discussion group?
Yes.
The point is, in the monasteries, they have debate. You have one person sitting, and with 27 people could be all throwing arguments at them. But the best way, and this is what I found from my own experience, you can do your meditation, keep it short, whatever, do it in meditation. But the real guts of it, the time when the teachings become real for you, is when you sit with one person and you go over what you heard in the class. That's the topic to be discussed. The commonest thing people say is, oh, I can't discuss, I don't know anything. But if you've both been to the same teaching, if 2 people have been to this class, and if you've taken notes, great. But if you've got good memory, great. But maybe you don't remember most of it. That's the problem. We don't remember most of it. But you take whatever you've heard in this class, one person to each other, and you start going through. What did she say about this? How many kinds of karma was it? What was that point she said? Which one? And you go through it, and you chew it, and you discuss it. That's debate class. That's discussion. So if you can do that successfully with 4 people, but it tends to be one person dominates. You've got to discuss it's called homework. If this is violin class, if you don't go home and practice what you've just heard, how can you go to the next level in violin class? But we're not used to doing it this way, but that's the benefit of discussion group. And if you do it really dynamically, have a shortest meditation, but then one-on-one, you should come together and you should rip the teachings to pieces. What does she mean beginningless? Why you say beginningless? Even if in that discussion group, you go one topic only and you pull it apart. You don't have to know anything other than what you've heard in that class. You've both heard the same thing, so you both discuss it. That's when some useful discussion. That's when discussion can be useful, and then you conclude. What do you think, Jeff and Nina? Jeff, what do you think?
I think it's a great idea. I would try to conclude with bringing the group together and sharing what we had.
Precisely, exactly. And I think this is when this teachings become real. If you don't discuss, I mean, already by the end of this class, it's gone in one ear and out the other for most of us. because we haven't taken notes and we haven't got good memories. They all have good memories in these Tibetan monasteries. And this, I know myself, if I would miss one discussion group, I felt a loss the next morning for the next class, because we, you know, and we had 5 classes a week. And sometimes when we did our exams every quarter, I would have 8 hours non-stop, one-on-one, back and forth with one person, because that's when the teachings became real. I can't stress it enough. I really can't. The importance of it, darlings, okay?
Yes.
So if you just want, you don't have to do it. You don't have to want to study it seriously. But if you want to, that's when the pennies drop. That's when it becomes serious. And you don't have to know anything more than the other people have heard, you know, and you don't have to be arrogant and be smarty pants and give all the answers. The aim isn't to be right. The aim is to understand it and unpack it. This is the crucial point, okay? So please, I really request you to join in the discussion, but make it really, make it lively between each other, but just only 90 minutes once a week is like nothing, you know, and that's when it'll go in, but you've got to do it like that, Jeff. Let people open it up themselves. Let people discuss, what does she mean beginningless? What do you mean? How can it be beginningless? Why can't there be a first cause? Have enough courage to show like you're stupid, you don't know anything, and you don't just have to know the right answer. That's ridiculous. That's easy. Anyone can get the right answer. That's not the point. It's to understand it.
Perfect.
Okay?
Thank you.
All right, darlings. So I might have to, then next week I might have to test you all.
Yes, and I think you've already made some of us nervous, because I'm getting some questions where to find the videos, the recordings of the teaching.
Good.
So for those who would like to
we all know this. If you're learning something, you know perfectly well you've got to do your homework. You know it. And guess what? This is when you get a bit enthusiastic about the Dharma. This is when you get enthusiastic. If you just keep hearing classes and keep hearing the same thing, but have never thought it through, you just get bored, you know. This is when you get excited about it. So I really recommend, find a dynamic way to do it. If you can all meet together and have champagne and cocktails, it might be more exciting, but we can't do that these days. But maybe you can in Switzerland, can't you?
No, we can't.
No.
We can't.
Oh, God.
We're just like the rest of the world.
All right. In Australia, you can. I think in Australia, they're allowing now.
Great, great.
Okay, darlings. Thank you so much.
For those who would like, please stay on for a minute afterwards, and I will show you the videos.
Don't chub, Sem chog rinpoche. Leave the prayers. Don't have the prayers. Just think. May bodhicitta grow and grow in my heart and the hearts of all, and may it grow where it isn't. And second, may all these seeds we planted these last 2 hours, may we nourish them with our thoughts, with our thinking, with our practice, so we can get these realizations, so we can become Buddhists, so we can benefit others, no matter how long it takes. Got to be excited, okay? Thank you, darlings. Much love. Bye.